Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. I welcome you to the show today. We're going to have an exciting conversation about how to not have necessarily hard conversations, but more productive and confident conversations. So as you tune into the Career Coffee Chat show today, don't be shy. Pull up a chair, say hi, say where you're from, share with us your name and your top questions when it comes to those difficult discussions. None of us really enjoy having a challenging, those tight discussions. You have to have them. And to be honest, how many of you kind of avoid them because you have to have it, but you don't want to have it. So we'll procrastinate, we'll put it off. Guess what? Your silence is also taken as succinct agreement. And if you're not in agreement, well, you may want to see what you can do to have a more confident conversation. So today on the show, to help you successfully manage conflict and navigate difficult discussions like a pro, we will have insights from my fellow coach, Jerry Fu. He is a certified coach and expert conflict resolution coach. Now, if you've never seen my smiling face before and you haven't tuned into the other Career Coffee Chat live shows or podcasts, my name is Erin Urban or Coach E. Urban. You can find out more about me at coacheurban.com. And I help high achieving leaders and teams elevate impact and influence without sacrificing your well-being. So a little bit more about the show today is, speaking of well-being, if you're dealing with that temperamental boss, hand raised for any of you who are dealing with that, or stale friendship, dissonance in your family, trying to meet expectations. Maybe your expectations are different than theirs. Well, join us for an insightful conversation about how to find freedom from that fear of conflict. So as you tune in, come on in, say hi, say your name, say where you're from, because what we don't want to do is continue to avoid those difficult discussions and learn how to have a healthy conversation when it matters most. Now, more about our amazing guest. Jerry is a conflict resolution coach who helps Asian American leaders advance their career and life journeys. Now, he's taken several pharmacy leadership roles, and he started coaching in 2017 to help other Asian American leaders and professionals deal with conflict they encounter at work, their culture, and within themselves. And without further ado, I want to welcome Jerry to the show. Jerry, great to see you. Thanks for coming on in.
Hey, Erin, thanks for having me. Absolutely.
Great. And we also have someone tuning in. Sean says, I'm a disruptor and misunderstood. I'm interested to see how to manage conflict without being shown the door. Sean, you're in the right place because I have been a disruptor and misunderstood as well. And Jerry, sounds like you have as well. And your career history has been very interesting. And how you decided to become a conflict coach. Like, that's not everybody's thing. You're like, you're not going to wake up one morning, roll over out of bed and go, I think I'll do this conflict coach thing. I think that'll be great. What was that defining moment when you're like, you know what? I think this is my space.
Yeah. It's, we joke, right? Sometimes you don't choose it. Sometimes it chooses you.
It chooses you.
And I say that because, so it's two sides of the same coin, right? On one hand, right, I said, I want to be a leadership coach. And everyone said, hey, join the club. Like, literally, like, you and I are in the same club. It's like, how am I going to, like, position
what
myself?
Makes you different?
Yeah. So part of the niche, right, is like, hey, niche down. And, it's like, well, what would I niche down, to? And it's like, well, your ideal client is who you were 10 years ago. Okay. What is their biggest struggle? Oh, conflict, right? Like, I don't know how to talk to my boss when he's mad at me, right? I don't know how to confront someone that I'm supervising when I'm not happy with their performance, right? And this is not just on the professional side, right? This is also on the personal side, where at one point I had to evict a roommate, right? That's something I would recommend for anyone. If you want the school of hard knocks, here you go, right? Try evicting a roommate. And then another time in a volunteer setting, when I was a church class director, my second day on the job, I found out that a newer guy was sexually harassing women in the class. And they were just like, Jared, you got to handle it. It's like, you didn't give me a manual.
No one gave me a manual how to handle this.
Just handle it. Just take care of it. So, Yeah. So Sean's comments definitely resonate with me, right? You're just kind of like, okay, I'm frustrated with whatever status quo is going on here. If I'm in a healthy culture and I'm trying to, push for positive change, and for some reason these people just don't like to admit that they're wrong, or they, and now they're like, well, we'd rather shush the noise than actually, consider his feedback to see how we can actually improve this. Yeah.
Sean says
Yeah.
not me. That's
Okay,
my
good.
point.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So I want to say hi to Deanna. She's tuning in from Chicago. Great to see you, Deanna.
Mhm.
Yeah. So as you tune into the show, share with us, what are your challenges? Obviously, Sean wants to know how to be a disruptor without being kicked out for being disruptive. And I guess part of it is the process by which one is being disruptive, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's ways and ways and ways to say things and approach things. Hi, Megan. Great to see you tuning in from Chicagoland herself. All right, so good to see you. Yeah, or Cleveland, right? Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, somewhere in
Silly,
the
it's not
Midwest.
Chicago. That's Cleveland. Sorry, Megan. Don't shoot me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So to tie into what Sean was saying, it ties into what you do, Aaron. I think just in terms of like influence coaching, right? Because when you increase your value add to the company, right, and then if people can take notice of that without showing off, right? I think your credibility goes up a lot, right, to the point where people would actually take your feedback seriously to say, hey, look, he has a proven track record of helping us along. And, it's in contrast to, I heard this analogy like a couple of years ago, which I thought was funny, where it was like, it's like someone's first day at CrossFit, right? And they're like, so, and they're like, no, you're doing it all wrong. It's like, dude, you've been here like one day and you know nothing about this. So,
but he's an expert.
Yeah, right. The confidence is there. So, yeah. So anyway, so I think part of it is just saying, hey, I don't know a lot about your situation, Sean, but at the same time, I'm just going to say the general principles, right, are to say, hey, look, do I come from a place of credibility? Have I, and even in a couple of days, can you demonstrate, hey, you know what, I can take this guy's feedback seriously because, part of it is just saying, hey, how do I build relationships well, right? So let's build these relationships well, right? Let me earn their trust. Let me find out how to earn their trust, right? Not just with the way I like to earn trust, because I had a classmate in pharmacy school who, he came from he was a Navy corpsman, and he was very blunt and direct in how he communicated. And he realized quickly that in a civilian space like pharmacy school, his leadership tactics and his communication style did not go over that well. So I think, one framework I've used, that has come up, I think of the 5 C's, right? So it's like, number 1, do you have compassion for the other person, right? Like, hey, we're people, we all have, kind of our pitfalls and our blind spots, hey, we have feelings. Okay, let me just say, hey, like this person's a teammate. Let me figure out how to work well with my teammate, right? Second is courage, right? Like, hey, I care enough about this person, and my closest friendships aren't afraid to address difficult things with me. So, if I really care about this person, I'm not going to avoid the difficult things. Let me find 10 seconds and just, let me just start that conversation.
What if you don't care about much about this person?
Yeah, I know, right? They have spinach on their teeth, but I just don't want to make them mad, like telling them about spinach, and they actually get mad at you for not telling them, right? You're just like, why did you tell me? I was embarrassing myself, right? That's a simple thing. Third is curiosity. Hey, maybe courage isn't working. Let me try curiosity. Let me just learn about the situation. Let me learn about this person. And, the shift I think we use as coaching is just like, well, I'm not that interested. It's just like, well, if you were, let's just make it hypothetical. Like, how would you become more curious? Like, if someone were interested in the situation, what was someone interested in the situation, ask or look at, right? And then all of a sudden you basically give yourself fresh eyes, right? Looking at the situation.
Right.
The 4th C is collaboration. Hey, if we're teammates and I have compassion for this person, okay, let's remember, hey, we're actually on the same side of the table now, and let's look at this situation together to figure out a solution that works for both of us. Okay, let's hope that.
So apparently, we'll continue our conversation.
Yeah,
apparently,
we'll keep going.
LinkedIn is having some issues.
Okay.
So hopefully people can tune in to this replay later.
Yeah.
But looks like Sean's like, oh, okay, I thought it was
technology
just
at its finest.
Yeah, it's not just you. Apparently, LinkedIn is having some issues.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's okay. We'll
That's
continue our
okay. We're
conversation.
gonna push through. Yeah. So the
And
final thing though, is closure, right? You're like, hey, look, we have to believe a solution is possible, and we're gonna find that together. Okay. Even if it doesn't look like anything what you might think or I might think. Okay, together, let's
right.
find some middle ground. Let's find some compromises. So, yeah, generally, like, so let's actually walk through a specific example, right? So that we're not just talking in generalities. Like, so
Yeah.
let's
Absolutely.
so I'll take an example from from work where we had a technician at one point who um, she stepped into a culture where we used to have once a weekly meetings. And basically the problem with those weekly meetings, right, was that all the issues that accrued over a week would have to be addressed in an hour while the phones
Mm-hmm.
are ringing, everything. It's like it just wasn't a
Oh,
good
yeah.
balance, right?
Gosh.
And so we realized that, okay, we're going to do a daily huddle instead to just kind of wash out
Mm-hmm.
the agenda every single day, do more predictive maintenance. And so we'll call this technician Dana. So Dana, we know her from a previous work situation. So we're like, okay, we can trust Dana. But when Dana came on, right, she's just like, I don't like these morning huddles. Like, I don't. I think this is pointless. We basically answer the same questions every morning. Like, I really don't see the point. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a once weekly meeting would be fine. And it was just funny because all the other technicians knew what kind of problems the once a week meeting had, with all the
Yeah.
accrual of stuff. And so they basically were able to say, hey, we understand that you feel like this is redundant or things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
the alternative you're proposing, we've already experienced the pitfalls of that. So we're going
Right.
to we're going to ask that you trust us, that we're not just asking you to assimilate. You can disagree, and we're still going to have these meetings. So if you want to either exclude yourself or we'll find some
Mm-hmm.
other negotiation, right? So now people realize they don't have to be afraid of conflict. They don't have to be afraid of disagreement, because we want our workplace to be a safe place where people can say anything that they need to that's appropriate and helpful, right? Even if it's
Right.
something that might be difficult. And so when you create that safe space to say, hey, look, um, say it with respect, right? You don't have to be overly tactful, but just understand, hey, like, how can you soften that just a little bit so that people understand, hey, this isn't anything to take personally. Ultimately, like, I'm saying this for your best, right? I'm saying this for the sake of our relationship so that we can, move forward together, right?
Right.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's one situation that comes to mind when it comes to trying to manage conflict well. It's like, hey, wow, she's dissenting. It's like, okay, hey, get curious. Wow, thank you for saying that.
Exactly. Yeah. And create a safe space too to have the conversation. I mean, you know, I've had my share of conflict conversations, and for anybody tuning in right now, or well, anybody actually that can actually hear us is probably on YouTube.
Oh
As
yeah.
Matthew said, we're trying to successfully manage conflict and navigate difficult discussions like a pro
Mhm,
on through our technological challenges today.
mhm,
But and I've had my share of conflict issues as well. I mean, I've had people who just flat out did not want to work with me. Now,
mhm.
why is because my boss set me up for failure.
Oh,
So then I had to reframe their mindset around who I was as a person. And
mhm.
in order to do that, that took confidence, right? The
Yeah,
confidence to
yeah.
believe in myself that I could even have the conversation. I had to be
Mhm,
curious, open to their point of view without judgment, and
yeah.
creating a safe space.
Mhm,
So if you're going, my top tip for anyone, if you're going to have potentially a tension in the conversation, don't
mhm.
have it in front of other people.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Great. Yeah.
That's number one. If you know you're going to be maybe diving into a sticky subject, definitely don't want to have that in front of other people,
Mhm,
because that will not probably help at
mhm.
all.
No, it doesn't. Yeah,
Definitely not. Definitely not.
yeah. Now keep that discreet, because the only two people that need to know it is you and the person you're discussing it with, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a sign of respect. Just say, hey, look, I'm not here to embarrass you in front of anybody else.
Mhm.
Let's just keep this between us, yeah, and let's plan to keep it, in house so that it doesn't spread. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Um, you know, if you're a leader, that
Mhm.
doesn't give you permission
Yeah.
to do any sort of contentious conversation in front of other people either. It
Yeah.
does not give you permission to do that.
Mhm.
So, as a leader, you also need to consider, all right, because these conversations do need to happen from time to time. Performance management conversations need to happen. I've had to have that when I was a leader in corporate. And one of the things we do is we don't want to have that in front of other people. We want to set aside a time and create a safe space. And even as a leader, even if you are convinced they're in the wrong, hearing their point of view is so valuable because it creates some aha moments. Right? You may have a much more deepful, meaningful conversation to take away from that. And the learning is much better as well, instead of just coming and going, look, Jerry, you've been underperforming here. We need to drive forward some action. I don't know what's wrong with you. That's just not productive, right? That's immediately, your defenses are going to be up. You're not going to want to have a conversation. You're not going to probably want to take any positive action items. So, just from a leadership standpoint, being able to approach it and creating that safe environment for people to share, and it being more collaborative conversation versus a you versus me.
Yeah. It's right. It's when you realize that listening and learning is really, when you step in humility, I think is really the biggest thing. Like going through my coaching program, right? Humble Inquiry by Edgar Schein was a great resource in saying, hey, with all the potential tripwires you could hit, whether you said something, you phrased something clumsily, or just, there's a cultural background of the other person that you didn't realize that you stepped on because you interrupted them, or you stayed silent too long, right? And, and you're struggling to engage, it's to give people that confidence to say, hey, you know what? It's like that balance, right? You're just kind of like, okay, I know some things. I'm pretty good at some things. And at the same time, I can't do my job well unless this other person does their job well. And okay, how do I help them do the job well? So, it's the classic, Covey statement, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And, starts with the other person. And it's just, honestly, I wouldn't have a job if people just read that statement and applied it well, which is fine. Like, I'll be happy.
I know, but so many of us don't. And why? Yeah. So why is that? So let's dive a little bit into why is it that we sometimes sabotage ourselves, even though we know that, okay, this is not the best way to have this conversation, or it's not the best way to maybe approach whatever's going on.
Yeah.
So, look, we have an official from LinkedIn. Okay. All right. So let's pause really quickly while we have a technological read here, because they're having trouble, says StreamYard. Attention to LinkedIn. Maybe an issue with LinkedIn's in. We'll keep trying and let you know if it's resolved. Please check LinkedIn to ensure the stream looks okay. No, it doesn't. It's frozen. Thank you very much. It continues for a while. Create a new broadcast. Yeah, we'll be doing that. Or just remove this destination from the broadcast and re-add it. Not that easy. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Wow.
All right. So moving on. For those of you who have met us on YouTube, we'll keep going.
Absolutely.
And then we'll add this onto LinkedIn later. So for anybody who's tuning on YouTube, hopefully folks over LinkedIn got the YouTube link, and we can keep going. So back into our conversation.
Yeah.
So why is it that we don't, necessarily show up the best way?
Yeah.
What's going on there? Why is that? Us first. Typically, we come into these kinds of conversations really putting ourselves first instead of maybe being more curious and open. Why does that happen? What do you think?
Yeah. I think because who's the first thing we think of? Who's the first person we think of when we wake up? Right? Yeah, me. It's like, did I get enough sleep? Right? Did I, did I turn off the alarm? It's like you're already focused on yourself, like almost by default, right? I got to make the bed. I got to get out of bed. I got to brush my teeth. I got to get my day started. And so, I think, because we have this inner monologue in our head already, right? And no one else knows about it. And we're like, okay, we can judge ourselves by our intentions because we know our intentions. And, my intentions are good. I'm a pretty good person, right? And, we all like to think that we're like, at least 70% like ahead of the curve kind of thing, right? And that, and so it's very easy to fall into the trap of, well, if I think it's right, then it must be right. I think that's a lot of things what people say. So,
that's right.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I agree with that. I think I'm right.
I agree with that. Therefore, it's right.
Well, I mean, like not to drag in too much, like, current events, but why did Putin invade? Right? He's just like, I think this is good
She's
for me,
convincing
and I
right.
just want to do it. Yeah, right. I think I'm
Yeah.
right. I want this. I'm going to go after it. Here we go. And and
Justifying.
yeah, yeah, right. It's just what do you do with
Let's not
that?
go there.
Yeah, I know. And but yeah, and so I mean, because I think about this where there's a great book called Charisma Myth that talks about this, where it's just like you want to justify, you feel like it's justified, and it's usually negative, and therefore I want to hang on to this, right? And then if you actually flip it and say, well, if you're willing to say, well, how could I be wrong about this, right? What am I missing? What am I willing to admit that if I only have two eyes, and I only have one perspective, okay, what am I willing to learn so that I can see the whole picture for what it is, right? So I'll give an example of a conflict that was lighter but ultimately comical. So at one point, I was supposed to meet a friend for a walk in the park, and I go there, and I'm waiting for like 15 minutes. She doesn't show up. I'm like, oh, like why didn't she text me or anything like that? And so as I'm driving back to my house, right, I text her, I'm like, hey, sorry I missed you today. I don't know what's going on, but, hopefully we can schedule something better next time. And then she's like, well, according to my notes, like we agreed it wasn't until next week. And, sure enough, I checked the text thread, and sure enough, she was right. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I just caused my own conflict. I'm the one resenting her, right, for like ghosting me, right? And then
how many of us have been caught in that? For those of you who are tuning in, now watching the replay later, let me know. I mean, I've done that. Like, oh my God, I can't believe they didn't, have the courtesy to let me know they weren't going to be here for whatever it was, or a phone call. And
it turns out it was entirely my mistake. And then I'm like, I'm so sorry. She goes, here's the funny thing, like, talking about making omelets out of broken eggs, right? You just kind of like, she's like, I had trouble forgiving someone in another situation, and this situation just kind of helped me realize, hey, now I can forgive this other person. So I'm just like, okay, good. I'm glad that a great plant grew out of this, this dirt that fell on the ground, kind of thing. So, but that's all it takes to cause conflict, right? You just kind of like, it was entirely my mistake. It was a big misunderstanding, or not a big one, but it was a misunderstanding that didn't involve her at all.
It was just. Here's what happens sometimes with me. My brain fixates on a date, and it's convinced that's the date, and even though it's not the date, and we agreed it wasn't the date, and I even have it on the calendar as it's not the date or the time or whatever it is, we have this, and our internal calendar goes, we need to call, or we need to show up, or we need to do whatever, and maybe we're just busy, right? Jerry, you showed up somewhere fairly recently. That, no, we're having it virtually. Didn't you get the email? No.
Yeah, that was tough. It was like, you're like, we've been contacting you for a while now.
Like,
really?
At the time, we were like, oh man, I can't believe they did this. What's going on? All these people suck.
Yeah, right. And then you're like,
really, it's just because we're either so busy we didn't pay attention to the detail. Our brain had something fixed in our head, or our ego got in our way, which is usually what happens. Our ego gets in our way a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And
we like to be right. We are convinced that we're right. I mean, whenever you're having a discussion, aren't you always convinced that you're right? Of course you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was really interesting. What's fascinating about this is because we're convinced we're right, and we know we're right, and we go in these conversations thinking, I'm right, not consciously thinking, okay, I'm right. But that's just the way we are as we are being. Our brain shows us more data to prove that we're right, and excludes all the data that proves that we're maybe not right.
Yeah, the bias is there for sure.
Yeah, so our brain is naturally biased. That's how it's wired.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make the situation any easier. And the only way we can, rise above this and have more confidence and courage is to also have the confidence and courage to have the awareness that this is going on. It could potentially hamstring us in the long term. So, that's something. Just be aware when you're going into a potentially challenging conversation, because that awareness will drive a much better conversation, a much better perspective, and a more valuable interchange than just going in and going, I'm going to prove to them that I'm right.
Yeah.
I mean, just think to your personal relationships. If you're married, or if you're in a partnership with someone. Yeah. How many times do you have that conversation? You know, you're right.
Yeah, too often, really. And it never, I don't know people who have these conversations where it goes well. And they say, oh, it was great. This is like, well, are you still together? It's like, no. It's like, no,
Yeah.
but it was
How'd
great.
that work out? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, to your point, right? So another example I could give is like, let's say, as a pharmacist, right, doctor sends in the script and like, there's a dose that's just completely off. And I'm just like, I'm already, right, how dare this doctor, he has, I can't believe that they gave this guy a license, right, and then, but what's a better posture, right? Is it to embarrass him and to shame him and thinking that, oh wow, Jerry's such this great pharmacist that he really showed me up, right?
That's
Or
probably not going to go over well.
yeah, exactly, right. Or is it, hey, doctor, I was looking at this dose, right? It seemed kind of strange. It's not one I've usually seen. I did some clinical research, but I didn't see anything to justify this. Could you tell me a little more about the patient situation? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're collaborating, right? Now
Right.
I'm not, even if I think he's wrong about something, I don't know what he's exactly wrong about.
So
Or
you're not trying to push it down his throat.
Exactly,
Right?
right? You're just serving this up and you're saying, hey, based on what I've seen, here's what I would recommend, or here's what I would suggest. It is your choice whether or not my help is actually relevant or valid. But this is me looking out for you, right? If I'm wrong, please tell me, right? Tell me, what am I missing, right? That's a wonderful coaching question. We said, what am I missing, right? Hey, this is what I'm seeing. Here's what I'd recommend based on what I've seen, but what am I missing? And now, right now, you're in a position to say, hey, look, I know some things, I don't know everything, and I need your help learning everything. So show me a better way.
Yeah, and be more collaborative.
Exactly.
I say hi to Mauricio. Great to see you.
Thanks for the encouragement.
Great discussion. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not playing today.
Yeah, Google will come through for us.
Yeah, so that's the whole point. Is most of our conversations, we don't necessarily go into them collaboratively.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not we're having conflict, we're not. Most of us don't think collaboratively when we're having a conversation. Yeah. I think most of us are either tuning into this now or later. Mm-hmm. When you agree that most of the time when you're having a conversation, it's to get your point across.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So where in that is anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere.
Nope.
Now, if you take a step back and maybe take a leaf out of the playbook of influencers and sales professionals. I mean, we want to be salesy. That's what we're trying to do. But here's the thing: as I've actually posted yesterday on LinkedIn about how people struggle. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to sell myself. I don't want to seem pushy." Well, it's not about trickery or bragging. It's about influence, and the influence has no place for trickery or bragging. So when you look at it from a place of influence, whenever someone wants to be more influential or have a more influential collaboration or be more influential in a team or anything like that, they always have focus on a collaborative environment. How is what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, how is that going to be taken by someone else? Right? So they're thinking about the other person. They're already thinking about this being a collaborative two-way engagement, and it is. How is this impacting someone? Most of us just barrel through life. We're not necessarily thinking about what is this action or this statement or how I phrase this, how is it going to be taken by someone?
Yeah.
Because there's ways and ways to say something. Now, Jerry, I'll share with you, if it's okay, what happened to me.
Sure. Please. We're open here.
Years ago, when I was a young professional, I thought that because I'm a tall person, okay, I'm 6 foot. I'm a fairly straightforward individual. Tell it like I see it. And that doesn't always go over well with everyone. So I knew that, but that's about all I knew. This is way before I understood my zone of genius or even what my work style was or personality or anything else. Way before that. Way before. Way before.
Yeah.
So all I knew was I needed to tone it down.
Okay.
Particularly if it was going to be a tense conversation. So I was having this tense conversation, and my solution at the time was to soften and slow my voice down.
Good.
Like this. The lady I was having this tense conversation with, she looks at me, she goes, "Do you know you sound totally condescending to me right now?"
Oh, no. You talk to me like
and
a
I
kid.
really
Yeah.
appreciated it because
hmm
I had no idea.
hmm
And I was just like taken aback. So here's a good thing. So when you're just taken aback like that, you go, huh. Now I could have defended myself. How
hmm
much good would that have done? I
hmm
didn't, to my
Yeah.
credit. Even then, I didn't. I said, okay, wow, that's really interesting. I had no idea. In
Mm.
fact, I was talking this way to avoid conflict. She goes, no, it's totally condescending and it's really irritating. I
Wow.
said, I had no idea. So is this better? She goes, absolutely. Just talk to me like you would normally talk to me. It's like,
hmm
okay. And I did, and it was fine.
Nice.
But I learned a valuable lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think it's beautiful because had she not had cared enough to tell you, right, you just sort of thought, oh, I'm just going to keep doing this. And, surely it's helping my conflict. And she's just like, actually, it's making it worse. And you just, I don't want to admit that she's right, but, maybe even if you disagree, it's like what you look for what's valid, right? You look for what's
Mm-hmm.
useful. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one way to kind of help keep the conversation productive, right? Even if it's unpleasant, just like, hey, unpleasant, productive are not mutually exclusive. Hey, you know what? This is good for me, right? It's that growth mindset.
Absolutely.
Hey, you know what? This will help me get better.
Yeah, and Tio just asked, he said, good topic covering individual conflict resolution. Could you please comment on a more complex conflict situation like
Cool.
2 offices or 2 departments? Yes, from a leadership standpoint,
Oh,
maybe we have sales and project management not getting
there you
along.
go. Yeah, there you go.
Hey,
Mhm.
we've never run across that before, have we? Sales and operations always gets along, don't they? I mean, they're
Yeah.
just like 2 peas in a pod.
Mhm.
Never. So
Yeah.
now, why is that? Now,
Hmm.
speaking from over here, I approach it from the personality, the person, the type of individual, their work style, who tends to gravitate towards certain types of situations.
Mhm.
So that's number one, I feel like, for any leader to help a leader understand what they're dealing with is to understand what are the work styles I'm dealing with.
Mhm.
Is this for the sales and project management or sales and operations example?
Mhm.
The type of work styles who gravitate to a sales role typically don't gravitate to an operations role, and vice versa. In fact, they tend to be opposing work styles.
Mhm.
So on any spectrum, Berkman, Myers-Briggs, DISC, they're all really based on a DISC model, FYI.
Go to the source.
Go to the source. So I leverage DISC because it is more superficially simplistic to understand. It is very complex, but for this show, I won't get into all that. Let's just say that you do have opposing work styles.
Yeah.
And people who gravitate towards sales are more eyes or influencers. They're more people. They're more outgoing. They're more people versus task oriented.
Yeah.
Now, people in operations, project management, not so much.
Mhm.
They tend to be task oriented. What's next? Drivers. They like details. They like organization. However, the people in sales don't really want to talk about the details. That's not their MO, all right? It's not where their strengths are. And it's not that they can't. It's just it takes a lot of energy for them, okay?
Yeah.
So that's the first place I would start globally. I'm like, what are the personalities I'm dealing with? And does it even matter? Now, it may be just 2 different departments that just quite simply don't get along.
Yeah.
So what would be the first step that you would think, Jerry, if you're going to coach a leader into understanding how can we resolve conflict between 2 different departments outside of understanding work styles? What's that first investigative step I might take?
I mean, maybe if I'm just completely off base here, please tell me, right? This is just me. And then thinking about a situation where you have like engineers on one side and then like marketing reps on the other. I would just swap out 2 people for a day, like have an engineer shadow like the marketing department for an entire day, right? And just take notes and write down stuff that doesn't make sense to them or, terms that they don't know. And then same thing with the salesperson, just have the salesperson go and just observe, right? In the operations section just for a day and just immerse them, right? Because anything short of just letting them see with their own 2 eyes exactly like what's going on behind the curtain is not going to go well, right? We're trying to develop a higher level of empathy here is I think what I'm getting to, right? Hey, let me just understand what it's like to walk a day in their shoes. And so I have questions on things. Let me just learn, right? Put them in a position where it's like putting them in a foreign country, right? Just like, okay, here's your passport, go, here's a map, right? And then, okay, now that all right, let's swap out the main people, right? Let's swap out the supervisor. Let's swap out, some of the entry level people just to get some other perspectives. So it's not just leadership dictating things, right? Let's get a whole broad spectrum of that. Okay, now let's have a meeting come together, and much like the DISC assessment, right? Okay, how do we find some common language, right, that everyone can kind of build on, right? Because I think that's a big part of culture. Having everybody use a common language that they can get on, which is why, people are paying, Clifton Strengths and all these other places, right? Because you want a common language. So, so get some empathy, find some common ground where people understand what I'm saying is what you're actually hearing, and I can appreciate your intentions a little better. So that would, in this hypothetical conflict, which we know happens all the time, right? I think that's what I would do if someone hired me to be a consultant at the company. I would be like, okay, you go there, and just take notes for a day. Don't interrupt. Don't say, hey, I have an idea of how you can make this better. Leave that for the later discussion, right?
Right. Yeah. Just observe. Just be curious.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Yeah, too, as a leader, give these people some guidelines. Like, just throw them in there. All right, you just observe these people. Have them understand, okay, try to be curious and open and non-judgmental. If that's the type of, if you have the time to do that. Now, if you don't have the time to do that and you really need to do, okay, I just need to do an investigative approach, deep dive, root cause, what's going on. All right, so having a conversation with the individuals, is this a behavioral challenge? Is this a performance issue? Or is it a process issue?
Got it.
Because typically it's one of those three. And usually any sort of conflict between departments will come from one of those three buckets.
Yeah.
Behavioral, performance, or process.
Yeah.
If it's a process issue, understand what's broken in the process causing the problem.
Yeah.
Get together and the two teams together to figure out how can this flow better to make sure that team A is giving team B the information they need, vice versa, what have you, right? Yeah. If it's a behavioral issue, try to understand again, what is going on? What's causing this behavior? What's driving it? Is there a metric that may be driving the wrong or incentivizing the incorrect behavior? Take, for example, one company I worked with. They paid their salespeople commission before it was installed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was a really bad idea.
You learn
all the wrong behaviors, and to the point where the salespeople were basically giving product away. At the end of the day, the company was paying to put it in. It did not work. So it caused a lot of heartache on the operations side. So really understanding are we incentivizing behavior that may not be helping us? It happens all the time because people perform their metrics. And also, if it's a performance issue, similar to behavior, what's driving that? Is it an individual? Is it a collection of individuals? Is it a miscommunication of expectations? Is it just, they don't have enough resources? What's going on? So understanding what's driving the issue as a leader is really important.
Absolutely.
Because Tio, as you know, most of leadership is problem solving and people management.
Yep.
That's what we're doing all day.
Yeah.
So helping understand the root cause will help inform the next steps. And then, of course, creating that safe environment for collaborations to occur and for those investigations to happen. From time to time, outside consultants need to be brought in to do this because people don't feel comfortable sharing. It just depends on the culture, what type of leadership or what type of environment they've been immersed in, whether they feel comfortable or not. But yeah, I'm really doing that deep dive and finding that out. If it's conflict between two teams, that's not just I don't understand what you're doing all day. Which sometimes happens. And I say that's more of a lack of appreciation for the other person's work because they don't understand their work. Right?
Yeah.
Like the engineers, well, clearly what I'm doing is important, and the marketing team is like, who thinks gets you the work? Buddy? I mean, so it's just a different perspective, and helping people understand that people typically don't come to work thinking, gosh, how can I piss people off today? typically they don't. So just
Mhm.
keep that in mind, that probably there's a misunderstanding or a dissonance somewhere, and diving down to figure out what the root cause of that dissonance is so we can
Mhm.
be addressed
Mhm.
appropriately
Yeah.
is what we do.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Yeah.
Any other top tips, Jerry, to share with folks tuning in about how to show up more confidently in a conversation that might be a little contentious?
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of it is just imagining that success is possible, right? I think
Mm,
for me, I used to go in the conflict being like, I don't know how this is going to go. I just got to do it. And if it fails, well, at least I tried, right? And, you can set a higher ceiling for those conversations, right? Because again, let's just walk through situations so people aren't
mm,
just talking in the abstract. So at one point, a pharmacist I was supervising made a medication error. They dispensed the medication to the wrong patient. Like a different name was on the prescription pad when they wrote it to that. And me as the manager, I had to report the incident, number one, and then number two had to address her and just let this right. And so when I go in there being like, she's not going to like this, da 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 da, and of course, she just said, no, it's the technician's fault. She put the wrong name in, da da da, and I just said, true or false, you are responsible for catching and fixing any mistakes before they leave this pharmacy. Well, I still didn't make that mistake. It's like, but you still didn't do your job, right? And so here I am trying to twist her arm, into conforming, right? And I'm like, what are you going to do differently? Well, I guess I'll just be more careful. Like, no, like unacceptable. Like I'm like slamming the table, right? And it's just, even if I'm right, it's not really going to help her, right? Now, then I just got a passive aggressive month of behavior, just being like, is this my fault too? And I'm just like, okay, no, okay, clearly I can do that better. But what if I imagine success a little differently, right? To say, hey,
mm,
do you believe I'm looking out for you? Well, yeah. Okay. Do you believe I'm here to support you and not just pin you and try to embarrass you for mistakes? Like, I'm not here to do that. Like, I mean, it may come across that way, but that's not my intent, right? Well, yeah. It's like, okay, so I'm just as liable for this as you are, right? Because it's my name as manager of this pharmacy. So, what can I do to support you so that we can prevent errors from happening again, right? And
mm,
now she's like, you know what? He's not just gunning for me. He's actually, you know, I realize now he's looking out for me. He's holding me to a higher standard, right? I think when you go in saying, hey, look, I wouldn't have this conversation with you unless I cared about you. I think
mm.
that also kind of helps lower the defenses, right?
Yes.
To really do that. And the thing is, guys, that phrase does not work unless you actually mean it. Don't just say it because you're like, well, this is how I can turn down the thermostat a little bit.
Yeah, you
You're like,
really don't like this
yeah,
person, but you're just going to say,
yeah,
hey,
yeah. So I think, yeah, just recognizing, hey, well, and success doesn't mean restoring the relationship to 100%. Like if that's on the table, great. Sometimes it's just, hey, you know what? We seem to have problems whenever we touch on religion or politics. Why don't we just not talk about those anymore? Right? We're
Mhm.
just trying to avoid things that are just going to cause needless arguments. Is that okay with you? Okay, yeah, sure, right.
Yeah,
Hopefully that's not an
yeah.
issue.
And
But
setting, understanding boundaries for conversations too. I know
yeah,
whenever I do any sort of facilitation,
mhm,
I have the people who are participating in the facilitation
yeah,
set the rules. Like, okay, so what's the ground rules?
yeah,
What's our boundaries?
mhm,
Okay, we won't discuss, like to your point, religion or politics, or maybe we're not here to understand who's at fault. We're really to understand where the process is broken, because
yeah,
oftentimes that's the problem.
yeah,
It's a process issue, not necessarily just a people issue. People interact with processes, and
mhm,
that creates the dissonance.
yeah,
But irregardless, creating that safe environment is very,
mhm,
very important.
mhm,
And it may or may not be a appropriate step for a leader to take, to say, hey, I'm just as liable as you.
mhm,
Because if it's a significant performance issue,
yeah,
you may want to approach it a little bit
yeah, of
differently.
course,
If
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
obviously a blatant thing,
Mhm,
but in this case, it sounded like that was the appropriate way.
mhm,
But yeah, so you can always come in and say, hey, notice this has been going on.
mhm,
Um, you know, is there something going on? This has been happening. We notice these things. Is there
yeah,
something going on? Because it may be something important, personal,
yeah, yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
You never know. So it's important to understand that, because people are whole beings that come to work. They don't just drop off their personal life at the door, if they're driving into work, or just sign on with one part of their persona, if it's virtual. They're a whole person. And understanding that people are very complex creatures, and appreciating that, and understanding that we don't really know what is going on in their life, and just being open and curious is a first great step. Instead of coming in going, I have an agenda. I will be right today in our conversation.
Yeah. And to build on that, right, it's just to say, okay, so imagine success, right? Okay, let me take 10 seconds of courage. If I'm conflict averse, and I still am, right, it's just you just have systems to override like the natural resistance your body wants to just kind of be like, no, just stay comfortable, it's not that big a deal. It's like, no, clearly it is a big deal, and you're just rationalizing. So you can rationalize, but rationalizing doesn't solve the problem. So hey, let's kind of trick ourselves to set this boulder in motion, shut the gate behind you, make sure you can't backtrack, right? So that's part of it. It's just recognizing, hey, what's the cost of not engaging? Oh, I'm just going to come to work resentful every day for 6 months because I just didn't have the heart to tell this. Okay, that was my turning point. Just like, no, I can't let this sit. Okay, 10 seconds of courage. You don't need to be a superhero. You just need to be a superhero for 10 seconds, and then send that email, pick up the phone, just be like, okay, well, I can do this much. Okay, sure. You want to script your critical moves, right? Other things, just to say, hey, here are some things I want to be sure to address. Put it on paper. Don't let it rattle around in your head, right? Put it on paper. Okay, now that I know what I want to address, how am I going to expect them to respond? Okay, here's pushback, right? Like, hey, I need to ask my boss for a raise. He's going to be like, well, money's tight. It's just like, hey, okay, maybe I explain, how else I can add value to the company to justify this raise, right? And now you're starting to get creative because you realize, hey, you know what? Let me just go ahead and anticipate the obstacles that are probably going to be there, right? It's never like, hey, boss, I want to raise. Yeah, sure. Here you go. Right. Okay. But it's probably going to be some.
I wish it was that easy.
Oh, I wish you could. The abundance mentality, right? You're just like, boss, the money will come somewhere, right? Just trust me on this one. It doesn't work, right? Rehearsing also key, right? So, hey, don't just write everything down and organize your thoughts. Hey, let me practice in front of a mirror. Right. How's my tone? How's my body language? Do I project, calm and confidence? Do I feel good about what I'm saying, knowing that, hey, this is a beneficial conversation, right? Then to emphasize the benefits of this, recognizing that, hey, you don't have to settle for this. At least if it goes poorly, hey, at least you were honest and you don't have to let this sit on your shoulders anymore. So rehearsing with a friend, role play, with a friend to say, hey, can you pretend to be this boss who's probably going to, be reluctant to give me a raise, like help me, like just kind of get some reps. Get some reps. And then finally, hey, just do it. Like step 5, hey, you know what? You've prepared, you've initiated everything, follow through. There's too much at stake not to. And, just trust that, hey, you know what? You'd rather fail than not try at all. That's also, it's tough with conflict because you're like, well, there's like the secret, like correct way to do it, right? I used to think that there's just like some secret correct way of resolving conflict. And, like, you're not allowed to learn that, Jerry. Like that's only for like the experts. And it's just like, no, there's a lot of failure you have to go through, in order to get to that point, right? Like the experts, it's not because they've dodged failure, it's because they just experienced more failure than everyone else, and they just didn't quit. And now that I've been through enough situations on my own to say, hey, you know what? Maybe I can turn around and help people. I can't spare them from challenges that won't help them grow, but let's equip them a little better so that they have some tools in their toolbox so that they can give them the best chance of success. Absolutely.
This has been so enjoyable and valuable conversation. Not contentious at all.
Good. I disagree with how you deal with conflict. Whoa, hang on.
That would be interesting.
That would be funny.
Let's test
I think you should iron fist. Yeah, iron fist this stuff.
How good is he at this stuff anyway?
I don't agree with your methods at all, Jerry. Wow. Okay, let's do it.
Well, that's very interesting. You point that out, Aaron.
Yeah. What would you do differently? Right. And then here we go.
Right. we can have a real life.
Oh yeah, we could have a conflict right now. I just feel like I disagree with your methods. Okay, well, let's have a part 2 at some point, right?
Right. And it's interesting. Is sometimes conflict happens when we're taken off guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we don't have a chance to prepare. So if that's the case, leverage the power of the pause.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, you don't have to fire right back. How many of you have written an email and then said, "Oh, wait,
Oh yeah,
before
can't
I
take that
send
back.
that email,"
Yeah.
and then later come back after the emotion has settled and go, "Okay, this is probably not the best way to get either what I want or this push through or whatever it is we need to have happen or
Yeah.
the outcome that we want. It's probably not the best way."
Mhm.
Same thing in real life.
Yeah.
So let's say you were taken off guard and you're just like blindsided, like that lady who's like, "Do you realize that you are totally condescending to me right now?"
Wow.
I,
Yeah.
you know, I just said, "Huh." I paused. I thought, "Well, I'm sorry. In fact, I did not mean or intend for that to come across that way. I actually softened my tone intentionally to be non-confrontational. How would you like me to address you?" "Well, I'd like you just to be talking a normal tone of voice." "Okay, does
Mm.
this work for you?" "Yeah."
Mm.
"Great."
Yeah.
And then it was fine. So just practicing the pause and just saying, "Oh, wow,
Mhm.
that's very interesting," or
Mhm.
"Tell me more about that." And
There you go. That's the
okay,
great
can I
one.
stay
Tell me more. Yeah.
curious, even though my ego wants to say, "No way, they're
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
Let me show you how you're wrong."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Matthew says the email wait list is the best thing. Yes,
Yeah.
put the email on
Absolutely.
hold,
Yeah.
let that hang
This is
out,
slow down.
maybe
Yep.
even overnight.
Yeah. Sleep on it if you need to. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Or review it with a friend. Like I
Mhm.
had someone send me an email. It was something I need to reply to very quickly,
Mm.
and it was not something that made me happy. I was pretty displeased, in fact.
Mm.
And my husband was in the room. I said, "Honey, do you have 5 minutes? Can I run this by you?" Now he's very methodical,
Mhm. Yeah.
very logical person. Of course, my
Mhm.
emotions were like, "Shh."
Oh yeah. Been
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, "I'm going to read this to you. Can you share with me how it sounds to you?" He goes, "Well," he goes, "most of it's good, but you might want to take out this and that." He goes,
Mhm.
"Because that, no, probably
Yeah.
not necessary." I was like, "Okay, you're right. It's not necessary, even though I really want to tell them to go
Mhm.
stick it."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And we all have that. We all have those moments. So, but if it's real life and you're just like, bam, blindsided,
Mhm.
and you can also go, "You know what? Let me think about this."
Mhm. Yeah.
Not address it at that moment.
Mhm.
However, I encourage you to set a time either with the
Mhm.
person
Yeah.
or to yourself to come
Mhm.
back to that. And you just go, "You know what? That was unexpected. If you
Mhm.
don't mind, let me think about that and I'll get back to you tomorrow." Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah. Buy time and paraphrase. That I think paraphrasing well
Also
also
powerful.
great because I'll
Yeah.
give another example, right? Let's say, yeah, one of those curveballs, right? Sudden death situations. The patient calls, hey, my prescription was late. It wasn't delivered properly. Da da da. Happened this morning. Actually, just this patient was
Mhm.
super upset, and you know, and so you paraphrase right after you listen without interrupting, right? Because interrupting, well, you can do it, but just do it at your own risk, right?
Yeah.
Listen without interrupting, get the whole story. Hey, so Mr. James, so from what I understand, you were expecting a phone call from us after we had resolved the situation. Uh, you know, After we had talked to the courier to make sure that they would not, just knock and run or whatever. It's like, yes. It's like, that's what I'm upset about. It's like, okay, would you be willing to give me 30 minutes to get them on the phone and do my own research and digging so that we can line up the best solution for you? Well, I want it in 10. I'm just like, look, sir, I can't promise that, right? I they're busy with other things. I'm going to try in half an hour. If anything changes, I'll let you know. Is that okay? Right? And you can gently just negotiate and say, because you have to
Mhm.
emphasize, hey, look, I'm doing the best. I want to do everything I can to make
Mhm.
sure we get a solution for you. Are you willing to give me that grace and that space and that flexibility to do that for you? Right? Are you willing to let me finesse my way to the finish line instead of kind of force the issue? And generally, most people don't want to say no to that because by now they realize, hey, you know what? I'm beating up the wrong person.
Right,
Right?
right. You cannot move a mountain by yourself. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's just like
Exactly.
that's just the thing. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that happens quite a bit. I've been
Yep.
in very high stakes project meetings where client was not happy.
Mm,
And you have to present the unfortunate facts in a very calm way, and it's not confrontational,
Yeah.
and to share with them that, this is what we're doing, and, and just be prepared to let it roll off.
Yeah.
And, what I also encourage people to do, you mentioned that paraphrasing. That's very,
Mhm.
very powerful,
Mhm.
because let's just say you are having a contentious conversation. What you have heard or inferred from what somebody said may not be what they meant,
Mhm.
particularly when you're just starting off a conversation.
Yeah.
For example, I'm married to an engineer, and sometimes
Mhm.
what he says is not well, it sounds is not what he meant. It's like, did you mean for that to sound this way?
Mhm.
Well, no, I didn't. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, just want you to know that's how it
Okay.
sounded
Yeah. Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. No, I know. This
Yeah.
is this might be intention. This is how it came across. Well, I wasn't trying to be mean. It's like, well, this is still how it came across. Like
Yeah.
you might
And
not feel that
be
way, but
cautious about,
of course. Yeah.
browbeating the person. If
Of
they say,
course. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I didn't intend for that to
Yeah.
be
Of
that
course.
way.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
okay. And be willing
Yeah.
to let that emotion, because
Yeah.
that emotion went, ah, and
Yeah.
be,
Exactly.
let's
Yeah.
just like pet the emotion. It's okay. It's okay. Emotion. You can go back in your cage.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Well, Jerry, it's been a big pleasure having you on the Career Coffee Chat today. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and these wonderful stories about how you've not only helped deal with conflict, but you help clients deal with conflict as well.
Mhm.
Because it conflict happens.
Yeah.
It's a part of our life.
Yeah.
And isn't it much more empowering to move forward in your life and in your career, knowing and having the confidence and clarity, as you mentioned on your website? Oh, by the way, speaking of website, don't forget to grab Jerry's guide that's also in the notes on LinkedIn. I'll put him on the show notes for YouTube as well, so you can have access to that and get his guide. It is on his website, which is in the show notes on YouTube, so be sure you grab that. It's a wonderful guide to help you proceed forward with confidence and clarity. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and grab all the Career Coffee Chat shows that you ever could possibly want to hear. And be sure, and if you're subscribed, you're also notified of any live shows coming up. And no offense, LinkedIn, we don't have as many issues.
Yeah. Right. Seriously.
Shame on you, LinkedIn. Shame, shame, shame. So as always, Jerry, again, thank you so much for tuning in and sharing your space with us today and your insights. And for all of you tuning in an hour later, it's great having you. Always good to see you. And all my friends, my biggest wish for you is to keep elevating.
See you all next time.
Okay. Bye for now.